Hi, One SBR Videos. I'm Peter Loshak. We are previewing the two college football semifinal games right now with professional sports bettor Ted Savransky, a.k.a. Teddy Covers. We just got finished analyzing Oklahoma-Clemson. Now we're going to take a look at Michigan State, Alabama. Teddy Covers, Alabama, a 9.5-point favorite here. The total is 47. Greek is hanging a 47.5. And, Michigan State, of course, lost their first 6 games against the spread. Then after that, closed the year on a much better ATS run, 5-1-1 ATS. And then Alabama, a great team, but the market is very much, caught up with that. They did close on a nice 4-1 ATS run in their last 5. Their last game was kind of typical Alabama, though. They just lost it by a little bit ATS. They beat Florida by 14 in a solid win, but the market had them at 16.5 on the closing line. Just a little bit too big of a favorite here. I think few people would argue that Alabama shouldn't be a decent-sized favorite here. The question is 9.5. Is that a little bit too high? What do you think, Teddy?
And certainly, would it shock anybody if Alabama wins this game by a touchdown? Right. Wins and doesn't cover? Wouldn't shock me in the slightest. I think Alabama is absolutely a better team than Michigan State on both sides of the football. It's hard for me to envision a scenario in which Connor Cook is leading that Spartan offense up and down the field against the Crimson Tide. The only 2 games all year that Alabama's defense got tested came against spread attacks, Ole Miss and Texas A&M, and even then Texas A&M wasn't a big test for that Crimson Tide defense. But those are the only 2 games that gave up more than 20 points all season. And in every recent year, the only offense that Alabama has had problem with are the up-tempo, fast-paced spread attacks. And that's the antithesis of what Michigan State runs. The Spartans are going to play Big Ten football. They're going 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Cook is a solid QB. He does have NFL upside. But it's not like Michigan State's got a bunch of big play weapons on the outside. For the Spartans to hang around in this game and have a chance at the upset in the fourth quarter, they need to play defense, they need to control the clock, and they need to generate some semblance of an offense to keep that Alabama offense off the field. None of them are going to be easy. But that being said, Peter, it's hard to make money with teams like Alabama at this time of the year. It really is. Alabama is the number 1 team in the country.
But I feel like, let me just ask you this. I feel like with Alabama in general, they're the kind of team, when they have elite teams, which I think they do have this year, unquestionably, they're the kind of team that, like, during the regular season, obviously they're a big, betting favorite with the public, and they're kind of middling ATS. They have like 50-50-ish overall records, and like they lose their games against like Charleston Southern, was like a 40-point favorite or whatever, ATS. And so they wind up with a regular season ATS record like of 6-7 or something like that. But then when it comes to like the big games, they're like big favorites against equally, against also quality teams. And then they wind up like covering those games sort of easier than expected. And it just feels like that's how Alabama goes each year. So maybe they do have betting value in a game like this, even as a big favorite against Michigan State.
They might, because again, when I break down the personnel here, I think it's going to be really hard for Sparty to score points. So the question is whether that Michigan State defense, which isn't as good as it was last year, I think last year's defense was better, whether they can shut down an Alabama offense that's been hit and miss, for extended stretches. I know that Derrick Henry won the Heisman Trophy. Of course, he carried 90 carries in the last 2 games, which is a little bit ridiculous even for Nick Saban to do that to a college kid. You wonder if he has the same spring in his step this week against Sparty. And I'm not in love with Jay Coker. He's good. He's not great. The Crimson Tide receiving corps, good, but not great. They don't have the Julio Jones. They don't have the Amari Cooper this year. And it's, but in my mind, the one key tenet, the single biggest focus of my handicap is Michigan State's track record as an underdog, because it's not a good track record. It's an unbelievable track record. And that, to me, is the number 1 handicapping factor in this game. Yeah. You can't give points to Mark D'Antonio with extra time to prepare.
All right. So your pick on this game would be Michigan State at 9.5?
Again, there's no urgency.
Right.
The Spartans, the current number, 9.5. You can find some 10s out there. I would expect on game day the money will come for Alabama. This is one you may have to wait until right up until kickoff. But I'd sure rather have plus 10.5 in my pocket at kickoff than plus 9.5 sitting around in my pocket for 2 weeks beforehand. But, again, Michigan State 12-1 against the spread as a dog in
Right.
D'Antonio's last 13 tries. And the only loss, you're going to remember the game, Peter, it was at Oregon.
Yep.
They were leading straight up at Oregon in the second half when Oregon was a national championship caliber team. And things went bad. They had a couple of turnovers. They had a really bad 10-minute stretch. They ended up failing to cover. But at no point in that contest was Michigan State outclassed in a way that they couldn't win on Oregon's home field. If they can win there, and they didn't, they failed to cover in the end. But the final score did not tell the true picture of that ballgame. That's their only point spread loss in the last 13 tries as a dog.
Yeah.
I can't bet against this team in that role. I just can't do it.
Yeah, and we all remember very recently they were a 14.5-point underdog, closing underdog against Ohio State, and of course won that game outright. Teddy Covers believes that this line might close even higher than the current line of 9.5. Teddy Covers, thanks so much for your thoughts on this game.